Black Conversations Season 4 is proudly brought to you by Castle Milk Stout. The opinions expressed within this series are solely of the individuals and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the Castle Milk Stout brand. Please be advised, the following program contains views which may be triggering for sensitive viewers.
My name is Dr. Bababuntu. I am a community scholar focusing on African-centered education and practice.
My name is Kensanim Kari. I'm a South African, born in Pretoria. I work between Berlin, Johannesburg, and Cape Town as a curator and artist and part-time educator, teaching in epistemicide and restitution.
My name is Abba Ayaleu Amlak. Uheruseke Mankamun, Silo Samans, Zingelengwe, Boya Bengwe.
My name is Stout Haramanuba. I'm a grandmaster. I'm a director of Bantu Soul Society, an Institute of African Spirituality.
My name is Umkhulu Nsengiza, the CEO of the Zinzi Mandela Foundation and the co-founder of the Kemet African Royal Calendar.
I think being Black means many things, but it starts with a mental attitude. It involves an understanding of the people that I represent, and it means a commitment to Black people in this world, that I need to show up for myself, for my sisters and my brothers, for the people on this planet that I consider to be my family.
I don't believe people can be identified by colors. I think humanity is deeper than that, you know? What does it mean to be Black? Nothing. What does it mean to be human? It means everything.
Our history as African people it's critical to look at who we were before colonization, pre-contact, you know, and to educate people about that. You know, I think in terms of identity politics, we have like a very subsidized identity where Blackness has been defined by the other throughout time.
Our history as Black people is important because it's a contested space. Over the years, people have been trying to tell us about us. People claim to have discovered us. People claim that they know how we think. You know, they've defined us. The studies were created primarily to study us, like social anthropology, sociology. But what is important is us telling our own history. And in that process, we must never lie to ourselves about history in order to have history.
It's very important to know yourself, you know, where you come from, who are your ancestors, what are their achievements, you know, especially before we're colonized, because the period after colonization, it holds no value for us. We have to go back pre-colonial time. That's when you get to know who you are.
I'm very much interested in knowing about Black history because these days nobody talks about it. We're not being educated enough about Black history.
To be honest with you, besides from what I've learned, like in history, in history class in high school, I wouldn't really say I know a lot about Black history.
Do I know any South African Black historians? Sadly enough, no. Besides Bo Mandela, Nabo Shaga, not really.
I know of Miriam Makeba. I know of Nelson Mandela. You know, I think those are the first few Black people in South Africa that the whole entire world knew. So,
do we focus on whiteness too much with regards to our Black history? Personally, I feel like yes, we do, but I feel like it's more so because of the whole colonization and apartheid for the most part, yeah.
One of the things that I think our community spend a lot of time discussing is, are we Black, are we African? And it can be a very silly conversation to an extent. But it seems like we are very stuck, and it creates a lot of commotion in our conversations when we bring this up. Some are not Black, some are not African. Personally, I have decided to use both concepts, and I find there's problems with both. Blackness, for me, means an oppositional experience to whiteness, and one that I'm targeted by whiteness. It's a design that I'm not supposed to be fully alive. I'm not supposed to have access to my history. I'm supposed to be marginalized. So me fighting that becomes a Black experience. And then Africanness, which I'd like to see as an unproblematic term, is also problematized because now we see people who are not African coming in to claim that term. And I'm then seen as an instigator or a hater if I have an issue with that. And I want to be protective about a term that I think we are just coming to terms with. But I wanted to hear from my fellow knowledge holders, how do you navigate with these terms, Black and African?
I always say, if you can't name it, you can't claim it. So you must find it in your own language. So I found the term that is very palatable in my language is Bantu. I am very at home with Bantu. Because then you can get a variation of it in different African languages. Abantu, Banu, Vanu, Watu, all the way even into Kemet. You get Ba-tu, which the Greeks said Nut. So that is one aspect. And the other part is what will then negate the Black is that even in our self-definition is Abantu, Abantsundu. Dark brown people, not Black people. Actually, the term Black is a political construct. When the white men decided to identify themselves as whites in 1632, they equally coined about 50-something positive words related to white. White as angel, pure as white, and this. But equally so, they coined other 50-something negative words. Black male, blacksmith, black sheep in the family, black as the devil, and so forth. Up until 1973, within the Nguni cosmology, the Zulu never identified themselves as Black people, as Abantu Abamnyama. They always said Abantu Abanzundu. So this is where we start to try to Africanize colonialism. And then Africa, of course, has got its own historical dynamics that there are debate that it's a name that was imposed on us by the Romans. Basically, you must remember that Africa was a continent of kingdoms, not a continent of countries. It became a continent of countries through the Berlin Conference. Now, as a continent of kingdoms, we named different kingdoms, but we never had this one particular name superimposed on the continent. This is a product of the 20th century continental consciousness, Pan-African movements and so forth. But before that, we just named where we are. Ningism, let me give you an example of South Africa. Amanguni, they say, yes, Ningism. That is the name me I go by. I don't go by Azani and all of that. It's Ningism. But Abesutu, they say Maluti. Amavenda Bati Pembere, from later when they add Africa Chipembe, from the Pembere, the golden rhino of Mapungubwe. And then Amatsonga Bati Zonga, like Africa Zonga. So we name the place according to different kingdoms and according to different languages.
There's more to come on Black Conversations, proudly brought to you by Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness. Rich in history, rich in taste. This episode is proudly sponsored by Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness.
I really want to talk about the term Black, right? And how that racial categorization is a social construct. And using the term reinforces it, And this universalization, right, which is a big part of Western hegemony of creating monoculture. You get monogamy, you get monotheism, et cetera, right? It's a culture that creates a taxonomy of illusion that tries to reduce something into what the West can comprehend because it can't stand complexity. There's a difference between something being complicated and something being complex. And I think now we're getting to a place where we have to unpack from a deeply linguistic level what we mean by certain things, because words mean things and the words are powerful. And I think our liberation starts with language, because language is the software of culture. We're having this conversation in English, right? Already it's part of that taxonomy of illusion, and so much has been reduced because of that, because languages are not algorithms for each other. They don't always match. So I want to start there with sort of like, let's take the term black and throw it out the window, because everybody can agree, I think, that that term is a subsidized identity that we were given.
Blackness, you know, seem to experience all these challenges where you are forever required to affirm yourself, affirm your position. And it's unjust, because we're not supposed to. Actually, we are being abused by our leaders.
The outsiders from the beginning, they gave us certain identities. The Greeks, when they first came across us, they said, we're Ethiopians, which means sunburnt people. The Romans, they gave us the identity Africans. The Portuguese, they gave us Negro. The Dutch here, they come up and they give us their K-word.
Let's remove all these labels and all these concepts and all these philosophies that don't belong to us. First of all, amaXhosa, so Tetangam, we don't have a continental consciousness. KwaXhosa. AmaPedi don't have a continental consciousness. AmaZulu don't have a continental consciousness. So for umXhosa, who was never exposed to anything written down Western, I don't even know the existence of Nigeria, right? All I know in Tabagandota, Itsitsa, Litina, Zintaba Zangagiti. That's all I know as umXhosa, unless they have external exposure. Without external exposure, no so-called African spoke about an Africa that did not exist in our consciousness. Instead, if we speak about identity, these are the 4 questions ezibuzwayo kwantu. Ukuthi ungubani? Hayi ndingubani. Ungumni? Hayi ndingumni wasemathileni. Kuphi kokwenu? Hayi kwiintaba zasethileni. Inkosi yakho ngubani? No, phansi kwenkosi ubani. Now this is the 4 points of identity for umuntu omnyama. If we are going to say African, who labeled us Africa as a whole? We are going to have an endless debate, because now we are going to start to say there is African history. No, there is no African history. There is Xhosa history, yes. There is Tswana history, there is Pedi history. There is a history of the land, yes. But to label it African or black and trying to reverse a racist agenda, as long as we are still going to sit here and push a against them narrative, no, whatever we do is against them, that's reverse racism. It's no better than what Big Brother did, you understand? So,
against who?
Against an imaginary enemy. Because right now, if we're going to sit here and say the white people walking outside in the street are our enemies, they were not even there when apartheid was created.
I think whiteness is built on fear of extinction. And the whole racial drama that Westerners decided to create at one point has a lot to do with a worldview that if we don't invade and destroy you, you will probably do that to us.
The African creation story says, before anything else, there was waters of abyss, right? The waters of noon. That is a carbon soup, a carbon state, meaning that everything was full of carbon. Out of there emerged the light, and that became the first atom that creates everything that lives on Earth. And what is the color of carbon? Is it not black?
It is black.
Hey. So anything that emerges from carbon, it emerges with the color black. To us, it manifests as melanin. To the plants, it manifests as chlorophyll. So that is our true identity. We are black.
To the white man?
I'm still trying to explain.
Based on the carbon source.
Asikafiki lapho.
Okay.
Sisakhuluma about the state of creation, because this is the color that have created everything that lives on earth. And that color gives me certain advantages as an African or a black person. Where umlungu, remember, umlungu and any other, they are a mutation of the prototype. There could never been other races without this blackness. So we should own it. I say it with pride, I'm black. Umlungu ingane, umlungu is a child kuwe. Umlungu ngeke akufundise because umlungu got its foundation of everything that they know. They got the foundation from here.
But this is why we are now approaching philosophy, science, history from a reverse racism perspective.
I think I beg to disagree on that one because we should not allow you to continue saying that black people, we're having a reversed racism.
Thing is,
because
okay,
first of all,
here's my problem.
let's define what is racism first.
When I say this is the point, we do not have the articulation to explain what racism is in our context. Now, by us sitting here and saying, Abelungu, they are our children, we did it first, they stole from us, they did this, and this melanin myth, I'd like to call it, I personally, like to call it a melanin myth. Because if melanin was such divine power, why are 90% of South African hobos black? Right?
Okay.
Now, my question here is, now, let us not base intellectual conversation based on one source. This is one. This is what you are transcribing now, you are translating. What you are translating now.
Me not. Minumlungu, it's an enemy to me.
Now, that's you are.
It's my yes.
You have a right for that. Let's not sit here and speak from one school of thought. Origin story, African origin story is not encased in a golden casket. It's not the only one. Even amongst Africans.
Can I finish?
The origin stories,
because we are now diverting
we are not diverting. Origins, your origin story, my origin story are totally different.
Stay tuned for more moments to savor. Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness. You are now watching Season 4 of Black Conversations, proudly brought to you by Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness.
The first people to populate the whole world were black people, right? Abatwa. Tina sinzalo yabatwa. Direct descendant yabatwa. Do you understand? So, yiba bantu abasinikezela that term called black, because Kemet means black, right? And it's the oldest term. Kungakabi namavenda amazulu yonke lento. Sizazi nje ukuthi siyinto eyodwa. So you were free to move from here and go and establish. It's the same people who established what is called Kush. The Kush Empire, the Kush Kingdom, was established by Abatwa, our parents.
There are generations who are stuck on an oppression that's not there anymore. Like, we're not in chains. So why would you want me to think like a person who is in chains?
Quickly, what appears here is two schools of thoughts. One is more on ethno-philosophy, like emphasis of ethnic identity and all of that. And the other one is framed from this continental consciousness, which you can't negate it because you see neo-colonialism produced neo-African culture. This culture that have all of us as black people sitting here articulating it in English, using all of these English terminologies, is a result of neo-colonialism, which produced neo-African culture. We're not going back to our ancient culture and all of that. We are part of this modern culture. Therefore, the history of it too. So we cannot remove the fact that for us to speak this English, it was a result of colonization. What Mkhulu is pointing is like, we responding to this particular situation that have us in this identity crisis is either we will be labeled to be engaged in reverse racism, or we are engaged in our reclaiming of our identity. So,
are we going to sit here and say black against white, or are we going to sit here and say, singabantu abamnyama endlini, how do we reclaim ourselves?
I think even in Xhosa, they encourage the knowledge of history. But masibuyeleni embo lasivela khona. Now to say that we can't sit here and trace where we lost our identity, then it is a disservice to us, because when we look at it as if we're not even attacking white people, because
I'm not saying let's sit here and deny history. I'm not sitting here and saying let's deny the fact that it happened. I'm not saying that. I'm saying sihlelila, sisekoyini, right? Ekoyini kusendlini, behind closed doors, family meeting. Sizoxoxa ngengxaki esinayo. Now, it's us only here. Why do we put an invisible enemy amongst us instead
it's not invisible. It's not invisible.
Speaking about what we can do to reclaim ourselves?
Can we not talk about Abelung and talk about ourselves? The knowledge that abantwana should know.
This is what
from
I'm
this.
saying. This is exactly what I'm saying.
This is an
exactly
African
what I'm
topic.
saying. Precisely
Can
what
we
I'm
just
saying.
focus on us as black people? How much we know about our history?
But what is offensive? Ubuntu betu was interrupted. So what is offensive about we talking about our history and our interruption and what offended us? It can be, you can't generalize. If you are sensitive to the topic, it does not necessarily mean to say all of us should be sensitive to the topic.
Who's black and who's white and who's Chinese, really speaking right now? Are you 100% sure that you are what you are, black? Your grandmother may be colored. Her father may have been white. What does that make you today? So if we're going to now speak about history and paint it, we are fragmenting a history, we are fragmenting a truth. We are lying. You understand? If there were Africans in China 40, 60,000 years ago, the Chinese today are those people's descendants, right? What's the difference between them and us?
Can we go back to the origin? Several knowledge holders in this conversation has presenced what we really are. Where do we really come from? My point of arguing is I deal with a lot of children and youth. As Ebukusini Solutions, we go out and we create learning platforms for young people. And many of the things that we have shared here are not directly adaptable in those platforms. So I'm not saying we shouldn't bring them there, but for young people, I think issues of blackness and Africanness is also part of a ladder toward knowledge. So for me, black consciousness means something. I agree with you in that blackness is a reducing term in many ways, but black consciousness means something because I've been oppressed through my blackness. But let's then talk about who are we originally? How do we present the story of where we really come from? Because what we are discussing right now is we are really discussing 500 to 1,000 years of our history. I can see the bright faces of young black children who are coming into life just because they know that they learned that there were queens and kings and civilizations and incredible innovations that we made. And when all you know is Popeye, when all you know is cartoons, when all you know is Snow White, when all you know is, because this is a machinery that on our children is very militantly telling that you might be cute and okay, but you don't come from anything that makes you noteworthy. And when they learn that that's not even true, even in the most innocent storytelling type of just relating a story to a child, you literally see how they come to life, how they walk differently, how they take the room differently, how their voice changes.
I mean, originality is, all cultures are hybridized. All cultures rub off of each other. That's the difficulty with originality, right? We all rub off each other. We can hear in our languages how we share words, how algorithmically there's something that happened that connects all of us, but at the same time, we're hybridized beings. For me, I have a hard time navigating this idea of the original.
There was a beginning before that.
That's what I'm trying to
Before
understand.
hybrid.
Yeah, that's what
There
I'm
was
trying to
a
understand.
beginning. Can we talk about the beginning
Please,
before
yeah.
that state?
Okay.
Please.
This is the part where I talk of African culture in singularity. Now, when we do this, it is a modern consciousness, of course, and we admit to that, and there's a reason for that. It's a continental consciousness where we look at our origin, that at one time we came from a homogeneous society where we share three things, that even when we go and scatter all over the world, we maintain those three things. A belief in the Great Spirit, which is Mudimu, Badimu, Botu. These three, you get them throughout the entire continent. And they're the pillars and the basis of us talking about African culture as a one unit. We're talking about commonality here. Because there is a common origin, even studies were conducted. 1994, a woman called Rebecca Ken from a university in America made a placenta analysis study of more than 140 women in order to determine the common origin of all people, and found it to be a woman who lived in Africa about 300,000 years ago. That everyone else is connected to this. Now that is common origin now. Now you talked about cultural crossbreeding as hybridization, but it wasn't like that. It's cultural crossbreeding. It's like the basis of civilization. Civilization is a crossbreeding of ideas, all of these things, understand? Because life has no individual personality. That is why it's umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. We get our identity through our collective. But this speaks to our common origin, that at one time we were this one group of people.
Thank you. Ngicela ukungena lapho ungakuvala umlomo.
Stay tuned. More rich moments await. Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness. Castle Milk Stout savors Black history. Every sip, a conversation worth having.
Ngicela ukungena lapho ungakuvala umlomo. Ngiyajabula ukuthi now we are saying, based on history, scientific research, and this, and cosmology, we all have a common origin. Even before the hybridization or the intermixing of the cultures. Actually, ngiyayibonga naleyo correction of the word hybridization. You meant the same thing, but isilungu. Sinamagama amaningi isilungu. But you are meaning the same thing. Ukuthi kuye kwahlanganwa. But the actual thing is ile I show you. Akuhlangenanga abantu bebehlukene. In origin, besibanye, we were one. And as time went on, kwaba nokuhlukana. Therefore, I will repeat my statement. For us to sit here and say us against them, is that not internal fighting again? Engibuzayo-ke. Because if we all come from a common source, a common origin, right? Then you will start to discover, okay, the cosmological point of view that says from the dark waters came a spark and the spark vibrated and that is also scientific on the periodic table. It's in our cultural histories. I'm going to push the envelope. It's even in biblical texts. Because even in the Bible, in the beginning there was nothing. There was darkness, there was water, and there was a vibration on the dark water. So but now it's funny if
about other people.
No.
Bring story of other people.
I think you are taking a point a point that Baba didn't make. You are saying he said we were all one. He didn't say that.
I'm comparing cosmologies
He spoke about
here.
African. If we're going to talk about Bible and Christianity, we must remember that a huge part of our continent and people have been militantly pushed into following the doctrine of Christianity, that or death. Like it wasn't a choice, it wasn't an option, it wasn't something that was given in case you might be interested. It's this or death. And through Christianity, the redesigning of African society has been so fundamental.
Can we talk about what we know when the whole world was black? Can we talk about that?
But when was
Before
that? When
any
was
mixture,
the whole
it doesn't
world
matter
black?
when. There was a point where
Where
the
did
whole
the Chinese
world
people
was
come from? Where
populated
did
by
the
black
Indians
people.
come from?
Can we focus on
What
that?
is their source?
I mean,
Babuyaphi bona?
So the thing
Nama-hybrid wani? They are a result of mixing of what?
The unfortunate thing on the continent, everything, every sentiment of most people is driven by money. You will never know what quotas are telling him not to talk about, certain things.
I've been thinking about the people that are still, the people that are still holding on, like the Dogon, for example, right, of Mali. They're still holding on deeply to their rootedness, right? Something that because of what happened to us as colonial subjects, like that we lost along the way, right? So if you're seeking truth, I think you should go to people who didn't get interrupted the way we got interrupted, right? And I think my disagreement with this sort of single origin story is that their origin story is not the same origin story that I hear from Umzulu, KwaZulu-Natal, from from the Ashanti. And that's what I'm trying to get at. That's what I'm trying to understand.
There's an explanation to that.
Like, where is the moment, where is the point of convergence?
But,
right?
we did explain it when we cited Mkhulu Credo Mutwa from Indaba My Children, that he talked about this common origin,
But
which is Abantu.
Can we agree? Prologue, every Credo Mutwa book, prologue. Credo Mutwa was an artist, a storyteller. And his books have a lot of story embellishments. He himself acknowledged and admitted not everything in this book is factual history.
Well,
so now we cannot now.
No,
he himself
don't say we.
said,
Don't say we.
Angiti we.
No, there isn't
he
one.
himself in his books.
No, wait.
He himself said that in his books.
Stop generalizing us.
Can we prioritize such information for the children at home?
No, it's because you see, it's because you see there is this tendency to preempt before we finish. You understand? Because we were talking about that we established civilization. But my brethren look at it as now oppositional. You see, because you see, there are records of the Japanese, even their stature, comparing them with Abantu. Understand?
No, we know about the Ainu, we know Leon.
So, but not everybody do. And
you know that.
No, we can't center everything around you.
Can you speak about something?
No, we can't center everything about you. No,
I'm not saying let it be about me.
No. We can't center everything.
It can't be about
we can't say what you only want to hear here. No, we can't do that. Because you see, Mkhulu said, let's talk about the black achievements in Japan. You don't want to hear that because you know it.
No, I'm not stopping you.
You are stopping me.
I'm not.
And it's a little bit
what is
upsetting.
African history outside European influence?
No, listen. You are not the presenter here. We're having conversation, Kaufel. You need to understand number one. We're having conversation here. So you're not going to micromanage the conversation.
To say that we're going to take Credo Mutwa's stories as our history, we're as good as taking the Bible and saying that's our history.
You can't streamline a conversation, particularly if you have diverse views. What you can do, which is basically the core of South Africa, is multicultural, multiracial, multilinguistic. It's a plural society. So you are going to have different views. The best you can do is allow them.
Yeah, I don't think there's a universal.
There is no universal story.
Like, this is
That's
where
the thing.
They all connect, but asikho lapho. Asikho lapho khetla ngicela ukwazi ukuthi those that came first eJapan, what did they do? Those that landed first eAmerica, what did they do? Those that landed first eChina, what did they do? That's all I'm interested in manje. Hayi lokho kunye, can you exhaust that, please?
Well, okay. Because you interrupted me to get into the point you want to drive this at. And you must understand that where there's a push, there's going to be a pull. You need to, once you get into the ring and into the fight, you must accept also punches going down. But now, what you interrupted was the civilizations that, the original civilizations were all black. And where you trace them, even their gods, you know, you go to, they have Krishna painted black,
But now, my
Buddha
issue-
black.
Can we stop? Can I?
Yes.
Can I? Because ngizwilawati
Yeah,
manage abantu mangithi can
Yes,
we?
yes, please.
Can I?
Speak for yourself.
I'm black. Can I have a logical, intellectual conversation with other logical, intellectual humans without color, without us against them? Can we just say?
No, you're missing the
No,
point.
ngithe
you're
I.
missing the point. No,
Ngithe I.
Yeah.
Can I have an intellectual conversation on my own,
do
me
that,
one,
exactly.
and discover myself without comparing myself to anyone,
Exactly, do
without
that.
trying to be first at anything.
No, do
Do you
that.
understand?
That is why-
Without trying to race with anyone
No,
else,
do
can
that.
I just try to find who I am and my value and my worth first?
Exactly, exactly. Do that. That is why you see we're different here. This man has got his bald head. You got your turban and one long beard. I've got mine here. Baba Bundu's got his. Umkhulu Mtsingizi has got his. Because we represent different schools of thoughts. We need to accept that. Now, you push the line that you push. But here, at the end of the day, it's a black line. You are a black man who don't want to talk about others. We are black men who are so happy to talk about us and the rest. Because it's us and the rest.
I think as Africans, there needs to be an educational effort from those that came before us to remind us, not even to educate us, about where we come from.
The conversations continue after the break. Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness. The conversation continues on Black Conversations. Proudly brought to you by Castle Milk Stout. Savor your richness.
I think we often enter conversations like this expecting that there should be one outcome and that the best thing is if we all can agree. And this is why I'm holding on to blackness, even if it's a very problematic term. Because blackness, yes, it's pride, it's knowing my history, it's understanding my position in this thousands and thousands of years journey. But it also speaks to the trauma that I carry. It also speaks to my self-hatred. It also speaks to the inner conflicts that I'm struggling with. It speaks to the community that I'm trying to be part of, that I see we are also fighting, we are hating, we are, excuse me, doing so many horrible things also to each other. And I think this is why I'm not always comfortable having these conversations in spaces that we don't own. Because when we talk, and we said, several of us said, let's talk the truth, let's talk the realness, let's go back to the origin. It's very difficult for me to get to that origin without talking about the pain, without talking about death, without talking about massacres, without talking about things that are very unresolved within the collective spirit of our people. And I'm not sure if the world outside of this always can understand that, and if I even want to try to explain it.
Post-traumatic slave disorder, post-traumatic colonial disorder, post-traumatic Christian disorder, post-traumatic apartheid disorder. We went through a lot of traumas, even in the context of South Africa here. We were never rehabilitated as a nation, even the institutions that came with the social structures of colonialism.
Land of African people populating the whole world for a long time. You know, it's from the elders, Abo Ivan van Sertima. You know, Uranuko Rashid did a scientific research about the presence of blackness everywhere in the world. So you are learning from those greats who there hasn't been anybody who said they were lying, because it's factual. He's been there. You know, he knows the people in Japan. Black people are still there in Japan, but oppressed by the mutations of the Japanese. It's happening all over the world. You know, all the Ogon people are being oppressed. So that's why their voice is silenced. So it's up to us to learn from the elders about Uguti. The samurai was an Ethiopian guy who went to Japan to establish there. Do you understand? And when you look at karateka, the drawings are there in Kemet. You find all the origins of that thing, Lape Kemet. And remember, Guti Kemet was birthed by Ethiopia, Kush, the first emperor in China, Emperor Fusi, was an African person. So, if value of us coming here is to assist, not to misdirect Abandu. In China and Japan, Australia, they were all established by black people. Do you understand? Meaning, Guti, black people gave foundation to what we call Western civilization. This is the excitement that I have when I receive knowledge about black people. You know, their achievements all over the world. It makes me walk tall. Even in the midst of oppression in my own country, I'm able to walk tall because I know what I'm birthed by these great ones.
Yes. We are creating another system of oppression now, a system of non-intelligence. We have to look at everything from a black and white perspective. Why can't we look at each other as humans? You want to tell me that what Shaka Zulu did in Africa is better than what Napoleon Bonaparte did in France? What Joseph Stalin did is better than what Mushweshwe did? What Umziliga Zigamashobani did to Zimbabwe, all the way from KwaZulu, all the way to Zimbabwe, it's better than what Hitler did with the Third Reich? Come on, let's not be partial in our judgment.
I teach a lot in my work, curatorially and as an artist, is about epistemicide.
Sure.
Which is part and parcel with the genocide that happened here. And these words are new words, you know. 1950, that's when the word, I think 1950 was when the word genocide was created. 1995 is when the word epistemicide was created to identify these phenomenons that move us away from our roots to this counterfeit identity, you know, that we find today. I think Western civilization, how I'm understanding you, is a counterfeit for African civilization. And it's a deodorized version of what the origin is.
That's true.
Why I'm interested in epistemicide and why I want people to know about it, I think the value of this conversation is that we really need to engage in the rites, the rituals, the ceremonies, the customs, the traditions that make us who we are. And it's not just for dignity, you know, that we can get back our dignity and our self-esteem. These are useful for the time that we find ourselves in now in the world. You know, in the age of perpetual war, there's never been a day when there hasn't been war somewhere. There's never been a day where somebody's not being oppressed. There's never been a day where somebody doesn't lose something, and it continues every day. We're experiencing language death. You know, our children, when I speak to my partner, we speak English. What's gonna happen to our child? You know, like we have to think about that, because this plan to erase us, which is really the grand master plan, to erase us, is bigger than all of us. And episteme is a knowledge system. So epistemicide is about the destruction of knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge systems in particular, through colonialism.
As again, loosely, Africans, we are divided into groups, you know, subdivisions called tribes by people, you know. It's the general term for it is called, there's different tribes in Africa. The word tribe is a problem. The word tribe is not how we identified ourselves. Rather, you could call us by izizwe, nations, kingdoms. What are nations? What are kingdoms in the African context? It's basically 9 families. We are all coming from one central father, one central mother. And by breaking away the sons, I'll give you an example, WaXhosa. There's 2 nations Abachachabe namagcaleka, and they are divided by a river. Uchachabe no Gcalega are brothers from the same father, two different mothers. Now, both mothers balotsholwa kwenziwa yonke into, and they were supposed to come bazothathwa ke emzini. And it happened ukuthi bangena at the same time. Bafika on the same day. Now you have to determine ke manje ubani uNdlunkulu, who is the greater house, who is the lesser house, because now bafike boyi-2 and they both come from important families. The solution was lo uzoba uNdlunkulu, the great house, lo abe indlu yokunene, the right hand house, and both of them can give birth to an heir to the throne. But when these two boys grow up, their father separated them. Omunye wayangale, omunye wayangale. So now the kingdom, which was one, yakwaXhosa, became 2. Now, if you look at many of our histories, it's the same. It was 1 and then it broke up.
So you spoke about the African nations. Central to the African nation is the African clan, is the African family, and which is one thing we struggle with right now, based on everything we have brought up today. And I want us to presence it because we are also sitting here as brothers. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also a component missing in the African, how we tell our story, the African woman's voice. We must not perpetuate and normalize what has been part of the colonial wound we have carried for a long time as well, that women are at the back, women are absent, women are not really speaking. That's not our story. And it's important for us to, when we look back, like Nkulu said, the reason we look back in history is so that I can walk firmer in the now and build a future that is built on power, the power that I can actually extract from my history. Absolutely. And I think in that, we can't build that as men alone. The men and women, and we need to normalize and get used to. And that's plugging out from a Eurocentric system. That's plugging out from what whiteness has embedded within us, which has been very much based on the fear that the white man has of the white woman. And we sometimes internalize and make that normalized within African culture as well. So I just want to remind us as well that the reason we need to talk about these topics is so that we can create a stronger African family, stronger African clan, stronger African nation. But at the root of that sits something that I know we struggle with and that we need to improve, the African family.
I think the mono thinking, of finding a centralized way of things. No, it should be networked. Different voices, women's voices, men's voices, children's voices, elderly voices, all speaking in concordance and in harmony with each other so that everybody is heard.
I don't want us to reach a consensus on blackness. Blackness is so vast. It's every aspect of who we have been, who we are, who we want to become. It's problematic, it's enriching, it's beautiful, it's destructive. So I think we shouldn't be afraid of it having conflictual aspects to it. And I think today was a great example of presencing that we are different, we think differently, we have different, but nobody came for anybody. Nobody said, you be quiet. It was not vicious, it was not destructive.
Black Conversations is sponsored by Castle Milk Stout. Savor Black. Savor Castle Milk Stout.